Toby, hi.
Добрий вечір.
Доброго вечора. I know that you know some Ukrainian words, yes, and you study actually some our phrases which you use during your activity. Yes, Toby, thanks for your help. Thanks to your nation, to your government, to your society for huge help that Great Britain organized for Ukraine and still try to keep on, which is complicated. I saw your photo with King Charles, which was made, I think, 3 weeks ago. I saw your photo in LinkedIn during some reception. So I was delighted that I have such kind of opportunity to speak with a citizen of Great Britain who met recently with the King. And what was your impression about the feelings of the King towards Ukraine? Because when I was in London several weeks ago, I saw his speech during the official opening of the session of Parliament, and he publicly supported Ukraine. So, what is your vision of his pro-Ukrainian position, and how he estimated your efforts, the efforts of all British volunteers who help Ukrainians?
Well, firstly, on his views on Ukraine, I mean, he's got a long track record of supporting cultural heritage, of independence of small communities and countries that are being oppressed. And so the situation here in Ukraine and the war fits very naturally into what he believes in, and it was clear from the conversation that I was able to have with him that His Majesty is fully behind the Ukrainian people, and as is the rest of the United Kingdom, as you mentioned. And it's really fascinating that I haven't seen any real waning in British public support for Ukraine over the last nearly 2 years. When you drive around rural England, you'll go through pretty little villages, and there are far more Ukrainian flags flying than British flags, still 2 years later. So the British psyche and mentality is very strongly in support of Ukraine, and that goes from villages across the UK right up to our monarch, His Majesty the King.
And what is the origin of such kind of pro-Ukrainian position of support? It's a question of Boris Johnson's visit to Ukraine, or it's a values, or it's anti-Russian position. So what is the phenomenon?
My view on why Britain so immediately came out overwhelmingly across the country in support of Ukraine and against the Russian invasion was because of the values that British people hold, particularly of liberty, of freedom, of fairness and of justice. And it became immediately apparent that this was wrong, what Russia were doing. It was unjust. It was against the very principles of freedom and liberty that the British people hold so strongly. And we saw that in the Second World War with the Battle of Britain. We've seen that with the Falklands and their right to self-determination. And all through the last century, certainly the British public has maintained this view that countries should be able to decide their own future.
So thank you for such kind of sincere support of your nation and personally you. And I see and I saw how many British people contributed to our victory, to our support. And my second question concerns your personal contribution and personal activity, which you already operated in our country almost two years. So what was personally for you the 24th of February? Where were you? How you perceived it? Did you believe that the war will stop or will start? And did you when did you come actually after the beginning of the war for the first time in Ukraine? And how you started your activity? I know you were in Poland, so from the beginning.
So the 24th, I was in Sarajevo,
Aha.
in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I walked my favourite cafe there that overlooks something called the Latin Bridge, which is where the Archduke Franz Ferdinand was assassinated at the start of the First World War. And I remember just this real feeling of dread that, you know, this was potentially the start of World War III at the time. We didn't know how this was going to develop, what was going to happen. But I certainly felt that, having spent so much time speaking to friends in Bosnia about their experiences during the war there, that I needed to do something, anything to support the Ukrainian people after the full-scale invasion started here. So I put out a Facebook message initially to my village back in England, saying, would anyone like help finding a Ukrainian family to sponsor? I was expecting 5 or 6 families to get back to me, and we had 150 families in my village who said, yes, we'd like to sign up, which is a lot more than I was expecting. And so I booked a flight to head out to Przemyśl, in Poland, and there I met up with the MAD Foundation team, who were just establishing Operation Safe Drop. And at that time, the organization was focused on translation, visa assistance, caring for temporarily displaced people in the refugee centers, as well as providing transportation for people across Europe and out of Ukraine. And so the Homes for Ukraine, the UK visa scheme, fitted quite nicely into that program.
Yeah, I know that your government did a lot for integration and adaptation of a lot of Ukrainians, and I was twice in Great Britain. I saw how are the commodities, how the attitude, official, unofficial, to Ukrainians. So your activity is has an almost 2 years period. And I saw your photos in Sumy, in Chernigov, in Kherson. So you traveled a lot. You have a warehouse in Lviv as your base, I would say. What are now, almost 2 years later, after the beginning of the war, what are the priorities for your activity? Because the humanitarian activity is reduced extensively because of the natural reasons. So, but we have to help Ukrainians. We have to help. And what are the priorities now? I mean, regarding the past.
So for our organisation, as you say, we've got a base in Lviv, which is our main distribution centre. We've also got forward bases in Dnipro, Mykolaiv, and access to warehousing in Kharkiv and elsewhere. Right from really when we moved in country in May last year, our focus has been on frontline humanitarian aid delivery, particularly in liberated territories and civilian evacuation. And the evacuations have been quieter recently, with the front lines moving less, but those humanitarian needs have been huge, and particularly with events like the Novkakhovka Dam being blown up, there was a huge immediate need in places like Kherson for support. But while the media attention may have declined, the need for that support certainly hasn't. If you look at communities like Nikopol in Dnipro Oblast, where there are huge problems with access to water, Kherson still has a vast range of serious problems and needs in terms of humanitarian aid. Places like Sloviansk, Kramatorsk, Zaporizhia. But also, one thing that was very important to me is to continue to support communities that may have fallen off the radar somewhat, be it Chernigov, be it Sumy, be it parts of Kharkiv Oblast as well, where the initial rush of humanitarian assistance has declined significantly, but those needs are still just as pressing.
So, the supply of food, the equipment, what else? You told me that you have some ideas about the helping the people which have the problems with the blood and the front lines. What are these projects now? What is your future of your activity as you see in the next 6 months? What is as you said, actually, the level of the supply, humanitarian supply, is reduced, but the needs, they increased. This is the paradox of this situation. No? So, what are the context steps and what are your projects?
So there's obviously the food security and WASH programs that we're actively engaged in, but we're particularly focused on supporting hospitals and schools as well. So
second thing, yeah.
we've so far delivered over 20 million needles and syringes to hospitals around Ukraine. We've got another 30 million that we will be receiving from a donor in Europe over the next couple of months. We've brought in school furniture and equipment for schools so that children can return to the classroom in deoccupied territory. But in terms of our other programs, we're in the process of launching, or rather moving a program out of its pilot phase to scaling it up to provide 10 million free blood type tests across Ukraine over the next 2 years.
It's very important thing.
Exactly, and as you identified, there's a real shortage of blood on the front lines. At the moment, approximately 22.5% of deaths on the front line are potentially avoidable if there was enough blood. And so it's a really vital project for Ukraine, not just now during the war, but into the future, to have a modern blood donation system. And so the idea of providing these 10 million tests is to recruit 2 million new blood donors. We're doing the project in partnership with DonUA, a Ukrainian foundation supporting the blood donation movement, and Eldon Biologicals, a company that produces blood type tests that can be done in the field without the need for a laboratory testing.
So I really want to thank you for interview, for your help, and I just want to say you Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.
Thank
Дуже
you.
прошу.
Thank you.